I got to Winclap, kind of an interesting path. I hadn't heard of the company before. I had a reach out from a nice little message from the CEO in my LinkedIn inbox saying that he had heard me speak on some things, saw my name in a few articles, liked what I had to say about the marketing world, where it was going, all that type of stuff, and if I would link up. Met the CEO in person, and we really jived. Learned that Winclap is a decade-long LATAM-based digital marketing agency and growth marketing-focused company that is looking to scale in North America. So I have been brought on to help usher in that new era within Winclap. So that's what I've recently joined as, and by recently I mean 1 year ago at this point. It still feels pretty fresh, pretty new as we keep learning a lot as GM for North America to help lead up that operation across all the various different solutions that we offer within Winclap. Yeah, it's very interesting for me as someone who's come very much from the paid media user acquisition side, that if we go back 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was all about user acquisition, and companies were just hammering the lowest part of the funnel and calling it a day, focusing on what is my lowest cost efficiency, and my best cost efficiency for actually bringing in new users into the fold, whether it's an app or a retail direct-to-consumer site, whatever it is. That was always the focus. Things really started to change, obviously with COVID and post-privacy, and they started realizing that, it's not just about growth at all costs and bringing in new users day over day. We need to understand, are these users valuable beyond that first interaction, beyond that first look at CAC or customer acquisition cost? What they started to find is, especially within the app world, is they were often deleting the app or snoozing push notifications or just not engaged at all. It was just an app that became dead within their phone. So I think what you're generally seeing now is this more willingness to bring the two of them together, the user acquisition and the retention, and finding this sort of concert of how these two worlds are going to actually work together. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing is you hear it now a lot more than you did 5, 6, 7 years ago, is LTV, right? Everybody's focused on, okay, I'm bringing in these users, they have a strong cost efficiency, but what is actually the value of this user coming in, and how can I measure that value? So you see a lot more focus on trying to understand LTV and the payback period. So I've spent X amount to actually acquire this user. In what time period am I going to go get that money back and actually start to see profitable revenue off of those users coming in? And in some cases, what you'll start to see is maybe actually the more expensive CAC in some cases, and this is what we often see with iOS and Android specifically, is iOS users are more expensive to acquire, but what we see is their LTV is a lot stronger. So I may need to wait a longer period of time for that buyback period, but once I hit that, I'm getting paid out 2, 3, 4 times fold in terms of the value of that user coming in. So that sort of measurement mentality, I think, has been very crucial for helping to bridge the gap between those two elements. With our quantitative growth model, is we take that into account as well. So we look at obviously we look at retention curves. So how long are we actually keeping the user in the fold? And then we'll assess, right, what is the cost to bring them in, and based on subscription costs, product costs, whatever it is within the app, at what period of time the company is starting to see value coming out of this user beyond the acquisition. Yeah, so I think going off the last point that we were just talking about, the ability to really think outside the box when it comes towards attribution. So like you were mentioning, right, these customers and advertisers were really used to just user acquisition. User acquisition historically is very easy to measure because you're just looking at some form of last touch attribution. Now advertisers are more willing and talking a lot more about, okay, what are the attribution models that I need to think outside of this, given privacy controls and the fact that last touch isn't going to give me the clearest read like it might have before. So I think that's one. Obviously, with privacy is hitting all the necessary scan thresholds within iOS, so you can get as much visibility as possible into actually what's going on. Otherwise, it sort of creates issues in terms of truly understanding how to optimize your media for iOS. And then, of course, and this again, as formerly a pure user acquisition guy, the increased importance on retention and ultimately really engagement. What are you doing not only to bring in the customer, but to keep them involved and make them and potentially move them from like a casual consumer to a more dedicated, loyal, power type of consumer? I think it's a great question. I mean, I think the best ones are bringing that element of retention engagement into the actual attribution model, right? So they're saying, I'm going to bring in LTV, incrementality coefficients, buyback periods, and there's no sort of perfect model to mix all those things together, but trying to figure out some sort of balance that's going to take into account those different things so you can actually understand more from an investment standpoint what is going to be really important from that first touch all the way through to somebody actually becoming a consumer and hopefully a consumer for a long time. So figuring out some sort of mix, I think, is really important. And then understanding how does that change certain elements within your paid media as well. So it's no longer just, the paid media last touch is informing my targeting, my creative, my messaging. I'm thinking about this a lot deeper than that right now. And I think to that extent, it's thinking about not just what are the offers, special discounts, and things of that nature that are going to bring users in, but what is the unique value prop? Because if you're bringing somebody in based on a unique value prop versus, get 40% off on your first purchase, that consumer who's coming up on the unique value prop probably has a better chance of being that retained high LTV consumer versus the person who's coming in for the discount and then gets out the door and you never see them again. And then you get into that tricky game of acquisition costs rising, and you can't keep up with it. I mean, you mentioned it. I think the privacy controls really have a stranglehold, right? So that's changed things, right? I think advertisers realize they can only go so far with a pure acquisition play, that in order for them to truly be successful, they have to think a little bit differently than they used to. So I think certainly privacy, you also mentioned cost, right? The super low CACs are really a thing of the past. And it's impossible to sort of scale up your business just on the backs of that. And then I think in general, what you see within the market, and this is what we talk a lot about at Winclap, is you go back 4 or 5 years ago, it was all about growth at all costs. Just grow. Don't worry about the bottom line. Bring people in the door and call it a day. And I think now the trends, whether it's related to the market, related to how businesses are doing overall, et cetera, is more towards sustainable, profitable types of businesses. And that lends itself more to what we're talking about today, which is focusing more on that LTV and retention types of strategies. I think there are a couple of things that come to mind. I think one of the most important ones to start out with is really trying to understand your consumers, your existing consumers, and defining that cohorts. That's what we often do at Winclap is we'll come in, assess the situation, and say, okay, here are your power users. You're tried and true. They're going to be with you no matter what. They love you. They're highly engaged, etc. Here are your core users. They're pretty involved, but sometimes they tail off a little bit, etc. Here are your casual users, the sort of, we're not that loyal, but like there've been a couple good things here and there, and we may come back. And here are your lapsed users, right? You probably spent a lot of money to bring them in. They bought something, or they subscribed for a free trial or whatever it is, or a month, and then they're out the door type of thing, right? So it's really focused on defining those cohorts And then how are you going to message those cohorts differently? The power user is going to certainly need a very different type of messaging than a casual user or certainly a lapsed user. It's a very different approach. They're going to need a different type of message. They're going to need a different type of cadence. Maybe it's a different balance between email and push notifications and in-app strategies and all those different things. So starting to define that and then thinking about what is the messaging and the cadence, I think is a good place, because then it feels a little bit less daunting. And then I think the second most important thing is just keeping it super simple from the get-go. A lot of times there's going to be an inclination to do a lot of different crazy strategies, especially if you're coming from the user acquisition side where it becomes super nuanced. You don't want to scare people off, right? You don't want people snoozing those messages. You certainly don't want people deleting the app and creating that type of danger. So keeping it simple, not going too crazy with the amount of communication. I would say erring on the side of conservatism versus aggressive. Yeah, for sure. So the way we really center this, and we do a lot of these types of growth panels, as we call them, where we bring together essentially many different parts of an organization, right? So it's certainly UA teams, retention teams, but it's also the finance side and the marketing side. And the center point, the cohesion point for all these different POCs is thinking about the business as a whole, right? So it's kind of taking off the pure marketing cap and thinking about, okay, what are the strategies and what are the ways that we're going to achieve true business success and actual synergy. Our quantitative growth model tries to align more towards that by going beyond the media metrics that you'll see. So it's going to go towards that LTV, like I mentioned, incrementality coefficients, buyback periods, gross margins, if that's particularly relevant, retention curves, all those different types of things that are going to give you a more sustainable type of method towards growth and towards profitability as well. So I think it's really making sure that it's giving you a North Star that all teams are aligned on, that you can bridge the gap and be focused towards whatever strategy we're implementing, wherever we're investing dollars, we know it's going towards this business-related North Star. Yeah, I think having a really good and streamlined and effective setup in the CDP is critical. I think a lot of times there's a lot going on within there. So our focus is really defining those cohorts, cleaning it up, making it a very logical type of approach towards the messaging strategies and the cadence and all those things. That to me is really the key. Probably one of my favorites is something we did for Shell's app, a specific app in LATAM. We started off by doing exactly what I've been preaching over here, which is really defining those different user cohorts. So we were defining it based on transaction frequency, value segmentation, meaning how much money are they spending at the gas station, because it's not just about pumping gas, it's about the other things that they could and other services they could potentially be doing at the particular gas station. And then really doing this A/B test across all their different owned media, email marketing and push notifications, and trying to maximize both within the app and offline their transactional and frequency value. So it's this two-pronged approach that we played into effect. It proved very successful, especially when you sort of open that window up, looking at it more from like a long tail effect. So we have the most reactivated users over the last 12-month period that they had, most recurrent users over 12 months, and I think most interestingly, the least amount of churn that they ever saw. So people actually not engaging or deleting the app over a 5-month period. Well, probably the most boring answer I'm going to say is AI, because everybody says AI to everything. But I think that's really the thing, right? Is AI in terms of defining those users, AI in terms of using LLMs to help understand more and pull data based on faster and more effectively based on what's happening within particular app consumers, and using AI for creative messaging based on how those consumers are actually responding. So I think we've seen it just help apps become a lot more efficient and streamlined in terms of their approach for their retention strategies. Well, I like to joke with my wife that I think the best actor doppelganger for me is Bradley Cooper, for obvious reasons. We share a lot of physical traits, but I'd say that probably isn't accurate. I'm probably more akin to like Carrot Top or something like that. But we'll go with like a middle ground. Probably. I always, not to say that I look like him either, but I've always been a big Leo DiCaprio fan. So it would be really cool for me if, as I continue to succeed within digital marketing, if one day they write a story of my life and Leo plays me within my journey towards great success. It just seems like a natural fit, Scorsese directing, DiCaprio acting, maybe you get a little cameo from De Niro in there or something. It'd be great.